And I was thinking like, okay, is it like our time at, single thread or French laundry? Thinking about these like transcendent possible meals. And then I really thought about it and I was like, oh, it's really these moments I had having Xiao Ye with my dad.
I think the thing that for us has been really, really beneficial and really great is that we sort of stick to our guns, and we don't really, like you were saying before, we don't really hide. The menu is the menu for a reason. We don't sort of change that. We don't dilute it for people.
No, I would love a second, just like a full second concept that's just less heady, more fun, like a second child is.
Take it back to the beginning. This is usually how we start this thing. You guys, oh man, this is such a cliche story. It doesn't happen this way. But you guys found a way to make it work. You're not even high school, you're middle school. Kind of. Well, no, really. You met in middle school.
Yeah. Right? We didn't become sweethearts till way later.
Yeah. No, that's a great. Thank you for pointing that out. Where did this all happen?
What part? The friendship or the
friendship?
The friendship.
I mean, how old were you guys when you guys met?
12?
Yeah, I think I was 12. You're probably.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? Ooh, that sounds weird.
Why? 20 years, 24 years of friendship.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
We grew up in Hacienda Heights, which is like
Southern California.
Yeah, Southern California, 20 minutes east of downtown LA. So like past San Gabriel Valley, like really out there. So our neighborhood, I think 15 years before our parents moved, I think probably moved around the same time there, was basically just hills and desert. So there was nothing there and then as soon as, 15 years before they moved, they started building stuff, cookie cutter houses, whatever, stuff like that. So yeah, we grew up there and it was great. It was a very little bubble that we had that was, predominantly East Asian of some kind, and then like the rest of it is Mexican.
It's incredible. You go off the 60 freeway, and it's just like, wow.
Yeah, it's like what am I doing? Why is there only chain restaurants, and fast food, Ross Dress for Less and stuff like that? Like that's Burlington Coat Factory. Like that's all it was. Yeah, and it's still kind of like that now, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
it's like a testing ground.
You guys have been here now, what, 2 years?
3.5.
Yeah, almost 4.
Almost 4.
Yeah.
But before that, when you, you talk about this, how you met in middle school. Was it in class? What was that like?
We say the basketball courts. He was in varsity basketball. I was a JV bench warmer.
Varsity basketball is not anything to be super proud of.
What was the middle school?
Mesa Robles.
Mesa Robles.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so we just, it's an outdoor school because we're in Southern California, and so you just you spend time on the black court, what is it?
Blacktop, man.
Blacktop.
Come on.
It's been a while. And yeah, you just you have your practice out there, right? So you're practicing next to each other, like around each other, and I had friends that were on the varsity, the girls' varsity basketball team and stuff like that. So we kind of
you went 2 different routes. So when it came to school, you stayed at Cal Poly Mall.
Mm-hmm.
You studied
hospitality management. Yeah. So front of house.
Mm-hmm.
You went to Santa Barbara, right? And you studied economics.
Yeah. No, not really. Yes, I did, but I didn't
study. Is what he's saying.
I went to business economics because both my parents own businesses,
How much of that decision was influenced by your parents?
So it's funny because the whole decision to go to college, 85% of the decision to go to college, to go to a traditional 4-year college was for them, right? Like, I think we grow up with this idea that you have to finish higher education. You have to do this stuff before you get to play and be an artist or do whatever you want. And so I felt an obligation to finish college because I would expect that they would be they would want to tell everybody that I went to a good college.
Are you both first gen?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Wow. And your parents are from
Taiwan, both the same.
both.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I don't know if you felt that way, but like, yeah, there was this idea in my head that I needed to do it before I went to culinary school, because otherwise they're just going to be like, oh, my kid graduated high school and then just went to culinary school, and I think it's a pretty outdated thing. And I remember talking to my parents after the decision to go to Santa Barbara, like this was 6 months in, you know, and I was like, hey, like, you know, I told them that I wanted to, after school I wanted to go to culinary school, and I told them that I decided to go to regular college for them, and they were like, "That's stupid. Why did you do that?" Like, totally okay with if I did.
They
If
would
I
have been
never,
supportive.
yeah, yeah,
I think in like our community, there was like a huge thing about, oh, your kid has to go to UC. Like it was like drilled into us that like we go to SAT school, we do the whole thing to get into a UC because that means like some status of like your kid made it.
yeah. You
You
tell
know.
all your, you know, your family tells all your family
like a
back
bragging
home,
rights.
and it's
How
like,
tight is that community in Southern California? The Taiwanese community.
it's hard to say because like our small town is not even a city technically.
Yeah.
There were so many Taiwanese people that moved there in the same sort of generation and like in the surrounding areas.
What
but, like,
brought your
specifically
parents
there.
That's a good question. I think it's funny because they're like the only, my mom was the only one in her family that moved over here. And I think it was the same story for a lot of people. It's like opportunity.
Everyone, the rest of your family is
My mom's side is all still back in Taiwan, and my
Really?
dad's side eventually moved over here in the States after they got established a little bit and had like a house and like knew what to do. And
for your parents.
My ironically, my mom is also the only one in her family that left. She has three brothers and two sisters, and the three brothers took over the family business and stayed behind. And um, I don't know why she left, but she's like the second youngest sibling. Um, Realistically, she met my dad, and my dad sort of like dropped out of school and lived in Japan to work and worked there for a couple years when he was coming up. They had his side of the family had very little money, and they met and they started dating. And then I don't know the whole story. I really should, but they ended up moving here to open a branch of my mom's family's company
What business
in
made?
wholesale auto parts.
I love it.
Yeah, crash collision parts. It's super sexy. Yeah. Um,
To be fair, this is kind of fucked up, but like the your insurance in that part in that stretch between the 57 and the 605 is a lot higher because there's a higher it's a traffic. I'm gonna say.
Yeah, for sure. And so it made sense to do it on the West Coast. And, you know, Taiwan, strangely enough, makes a lot of these auto body parts, bumpers and fenders, really, stuff that's not fun. And so they moved over here to do that. And then my dad started working for them as well. So, yeah.
You chose to stay very nearby. I mean, at least Santa Barbara, is, an hour and a half, 2 hours away. But you chose to stay close. Why?
well, I didn't apply to a UC. I don't think I was like a super smart kid. Book smart, I mean. And I remember I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my sister actually went to Cal Poly. She's 6 years older than me. She went there for art, and she was like, there's this like program in my school that's hospitality management. It's like you learn wine, you run the student school, and it felt like. And at the time, I was working in hospitality, and so I was like, oh, that's so interesting. I didn't know you could go to school for that kind of stuff. That you can like learn by doing instead of like learn by textbook. And so I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I think I can do that. And so I just applied and got in, and I think that was like the best way for me to learn. And yeah.
At what point did you start branching off towards design?
Oh, it wasn't until after DC.
Okay. So you go from there, you both graduate. Somehow you magically end up in the same big city.
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Ooh, you want to take that?
Yeah. So she finished school, and then got placed in DC through their program. I mean, it's like hotel placement, right? Like
Yeah,
lot
it's
of
like a
hospitals.
Hyatt, and they do like management training,
Mhm.
send you out there, and
Through school.
Yeah, they basically play. So it's like they have a lot of connections. It's a really Cal Poly specific hospitality school is really, really well regarded in the same like tier as like a Johnson and Wales and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if you're gonna do it and you want to work in hotels or like large corporate stuff, like that's usually the track that you want to go. So she got placed in DC. And at the time, I mean, you're older than her, but at the time I had just finished my first year in culinary school when she moved.
And you ended up at CIA, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I did that for 2 years, basically right after.
What was that
graduating
like?
college. CIA?
Yeah.
It was great. It was great. I think the decision to go to regular college and get the stupid me, like the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old
the party kid.
Right.
out of my system before I actually like tackled cooking for real was really good for me. Now,
Has it crossed your mind to ever go into the world of economics?
no. I think I have this weird thing about economics. I kind of think it's all fake. And I don't know why, because like I know some concepts about economics.
You have to
as
understand the
at
concept.
large.
I mean, I'm assuming
Yeah.
you
You
read
get
the
it.
paper and say, "Oh shit, things are fucked."
Sure.
Right. Or things are looking really good.
Yeah, but like why? You know, it's like things are fucked because of what? Because of who made a decision that now makes all of these prices go up and this and like what like why is unemployment the factor that tells us whether we have a healthy work? Like there's so many other things that you
Right.
don't know. Anyway, it's I'm not going to get into it.
I agree with you. I think it is kind of interesting though when you it's big news, right? The unemployment numbers came out not looking good. You're like, what does that mean?
But and okay, so this is I don't want to talk.
No, come on.
But as a business owner, as a business owner, and I know you know kind of how this feels, right? How you make money is dictated so much by how people feel, right? Like if I feel good about the economy, this is general public, right? If I feel good about the economy and I feel good about my next paycheck and I feel good about being able to afford all the things I need to afford, rent and food and all that stuff, then I'm gonna go out once a week and go to a really great place and have a really good time and not worry about how much blank costs. Right. Not worry about how much I have to tip. Like there's a lot of these things that kind of come from general either excitement about how things are going or like being wary about how things are going. And so when you live in a progressive city that is focused on doing a lot of things that like raise the standard of living, which is amazing, but then not supporting the small businesses who have to feel those changes the most, then you're like, okay, great. Like you are saying we're gonna up the minimum wage, which means more money in people's pockets, which means more money people are spending around the city, which means my numbers go up. This is conspiracy, right? My numbers go up, and like, the economy in the city looks great, but the people who are like doing business every day don't actually feel the difference, or it gets worse.
Right.
It's harder.
You guys were, if I'm doing the math correctly, you were in DC during recession time, or did you just miss it? Talking 2006, 2010.
Oh no.
No, that was I had just graduated high school in 08.
Yeah, ignore that. I'm just old.
Yeah.
Everything. But I will tell you, the reason why I point that out is because going through the recession was exactly what you just described, right? I come from an industry where everybody, all the small business, you'd look at them and you're like, these guys are killing it, right? You got fucking car wash pulling up to the building where people are just getting their cars washed. The dry cleaning that would just come into the building and just drop off clothes. And when that whole thing stopped, those business, it's not like they made so much money in that period that they were like, oh, we're good. They were making the same amount of money because it takes just as much to you're staffing more people. You have more, you have to sort of scale up in a way where it doesn't really level out.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like I can't make sense of it as a person who thinks very micro, right? About
Right.
my business and my life. And I economists are way smarter than me, right? And like I don't pretend I know what they think about and how they think. But every time I hear it explained to me, like I just don't get it.
Right.
Like I don't get it because as a person here doing what we're doing, like yeah, like everything's, and I think that's the general consensus around the country right now is like things. Everyone's telling you things are great, but it doesn't really feel like it.
I don't want to skip over all this stuff, but I like there's so much that now you as business owners and having the experience, you're 1 year into this thing, right? A little over a year. How much of how much have you been able to get right? If you were to give yourself a scorecard right now, you say, okay, this is the things that we set out for. Oh my God. Really?
We're hard on ourselves.
That's fair. But you know, there's certain, for us, it was, you know, there was, I've learned really quick that predictability is your best friend. Like I'd rather just be consistently somewhere where there's no highs or lows, and you have just this consistent thing. You're able to build a model around it. But I feel like for the first year is obviously, well, in my opinion, you guys wouldn't know yet. But it is very hard because you don't, you know, you have all this press coming through. People are super interested about it. I think every publication here has written about your story, your journey, and the food itself. But has it just been consistent? Has it been, where is the report card right now? How would you grade it?
You got it.
You got this one.
Dang.
You see it every day. He has to hide in the kitchen in the back.
Yeah. I feel like it's been a moving target, and which is why internally it feels like we're not doing a great job, because you're seeing every little thing and you're like, you make pivots, but then everything keeps moving. So it feels like you're just missing the mark so much, especially in the day to day. And I don't know. But then when I zoom out and I really like objectively look at our first year as people who have never done this before, who this is fairly a new city for us too. And if I want to give us, you know, some grace, it's like I do think we've done the best that we could for the first year. Now, have we turned a profit?
That's okay.
Would you
Have we, you know, made big lists? No.
would you
but it's
say
okay.
that which grade is higher, the zoom out thing, right? Because like when you look at the performance of the restaurant as a whole and what we've done,
Yeah.
pretty good. Like
I think,
you have to give it
yeah.
Done great.
I think the growth has been amazing. You know, I think for us to have the staff that we have and to keep it has been pretty amazing for the first year. And the food has just gotten so much better, in my opinion, and just so much more confident. Like when we look back at our like opening menu till now, I'm like, dang, like the techniques, you know, like it's just, you have done a good job, I think, in not hiding behind things with food. It's like it's very like honest and very confident, and you're not putting too much on anything, which says a lot, I think, in the growth of everything.
So
Yeah. What's the letter?
I don't know, just see.
Wow. See, this is what I'm saying.
Oh my
Be nice to
God.
yourself.
I think-
I know.
Sorry, I disagree completely. I think you guys have been killing. And in regards to what you described, right, which is from the outside and how people perceive you, I think you've done such an incredible job at you know, with whether you had somebody with the publicist piece of it or not. And I can talk about publicists all day long, but if you did it with or without, you have a great reputation in the city. People love you. People love the story. You have a great product. It's harder, I understand, to, I don't know, I don't want to turn this into therapy, but like it is harder to really appreciate those things when you're like, for as many covers as I get on a Friday and a Saturday night, and as popular as this place is, that should be reflected on my bank account every week, right? You're rich until Monday morning, right before the money goes out once again. You guys know that hustle.
Yeah.
I think I would give us zoom out macro business people doing this for the first time. I would give us a B plus. And then if you like zoom back in,
Right.
how did we do as business owners? I agree. A C.
Yeah, I think on paper,
On paper, like, you know, we're very fortunate, right? Like, we got through a year. We have found a way to tell our story and be very true to that, and put out a product that we're really, really proud of all the time, and all that stuff. And we haven't hit everything that we want to hit, but like, everyone who walks through the door, we feel confident they're going to be really happy. But in terms of like just operations and learning how to be a boss and an owner and an operator and do all those things that you think you're going to be good at, but you realize that you're not. Yeah, I think, done good in some places and done bad in some places.
yeah.
So.
But I also recognize that, like you say, from the outside looking in, you don't see the nitty gritty, the really shitty days. Can I say that?
No.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Like the really bad days, the really defeating days. Like, you don't see that on Instagram, right? So I recognize that from the outside. It's like, oh man, they must be crushing it. They must be turning a profit every month. They must be, it must be so hard to get in. And it's like, that's just so not the truth. How it feels on the
I
inside.
will say, and again, not to turn this into the advice show, but it is much better to have that feeling where like you at least are keeping things behind curtains than to have the opposite, right? Where for the last 2 years, and I don't want to make this about us, but we've had the a little bit of the opposite where we're like we have this amazing team, these people that we have some of the most boring kitchens, and I'm sure yours is the same, where everybody likes each other and nobody's throwing pans of hot grease at one another, nothing like that, I hope. Um, but then there's like for whatever reason, if people decide that they're just gonna hate you because they heard some shit about you or whatever, that's a whole different problem altogether. So it's almost better to, because for me the frustration is like, dude, we have such a like nice group of people, and I think that could be, that's just what happens, I guess, when you've been in this business long enough, where like people have to find a reason to just hate you for something. So in where you are right now, you're in a great place. I mean, yes, I cannot speak for all the other stuff because I know the inner. I know how hard this business is when you look at it this way. We talked about this yesterday. We have months where we're like, oh shit, like all three of them made money this month, and a lot of it, the thing that keeps us sort of going and motivated is the fact that we know what Portland is going through. Like, you cannot hide that piece, right? And we feel confident that there's a point where things will turn around, and all these legends you hear about, all these other fucking restaurateurs that like, oh no, we were doing 25-30% margins. You're like, how is that possible? But that was a thing before all this happened. So with that being said, I mean, I guess my big thing here is, what is the biggest lesson that you've taken so far in this last year for you first?
You can take that one first.
You want to take that one first?
He pointed at
I'm gonna,
you.
I want to come
think.
back to you anyway.
I'm gonna think.
There's a lot. There's a lot, to be honest with you. I think the one thing that the thing that's on my mind right now is for me personally, I need to learn to face things head on. And it's a kind of industry, as a back of house person, you're used to like making decisions on the fly. You're used to being like, I'm gonna fix this problem right now. And generally they're sort of short-term solutions, right? Just like on a day-to-day basis, what you do. And for me, it's been hard to sort of step back and learn how to tackle problems that are bigger problems and make solves for those things, and take the time when something's going to take more than just a 10-minute conversation, when something's a month-long process or a 2-month-long process to implement and stuff, and actually like go at it with the same sort of focus and intensity that you would with a short-term issue that has to be resolved right now. And so that's the one thing that I've learned is like I need to be better at doing that, right? Like really like seeing a problem, looking into the future, and being like, how long and what can we do to fix that problem? So that's the first thing that I've really learned. And an aside is like, I think the thing that for us that's been really, really beneficial and really great is that we sort of stick to our guns, and we don't really, like you were saying before, we don't really hide. The menu is the menu for a reason. We don't sort of change that. We don't dilute it for people. But on top of that, it's just like we are going to continue to make decisions that we feel like are right for us. Stay true to you. Stay true to your company goals. Stay true to the ethos of the restaurant. Stay true to the theme. Stay true to all those things, and just like keep trusting that that's gonna show. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? Now that you had time to
What have I learned? I think it's like you are your biggest advocate. And yes, you can have a PR team, you can have a social media person, whatever. Ultimately, I think Lewis does a really good job. And I don't know if people know this, but Lewis is our social media manager. He owns the Instagram. If you're DMing someone, it's Lewis. And I think what I recognize is like you have to, when you're speaking to your audience or your followers or your guests and stuff like that, I think like speaking from the heart and being super honest and super genuine, like you're talking one-on-one through Instagram or whatever platform you have. I think that is the best way to tell your story. Like, because I feel like people connect with us and the brand and you so much more when you have those long captions or whatever, because you're trying to say something, right? And you're taking the time to write something out. You take 40 minutes to write one caption, which is insane. But I think like has been the strongest way for us to tell our story and like in our voice and make sure it doesn't get misconstrued or anything like that. Like articles are great too, and I think they amplify. But there are a lot of times where I'll read some articles about us and I'm like, oh, it feels so like flat, or it feels like really shortened because you can only write however many words. Like, you know what I mean? You don't really get the full meat of it.
Yeah. It's like,
and our concept is so heady, right?
Which I want to talk to you about, because I think that there's something really important about what you guys are doing, the intentionality, right? Because for a long time, you had to do, if you come from a certain background, it's like for me, Mexican cuisine was always tackled as here's the things that most people are familiar with. Here's tacos, tortas, things like that. And we decided to focus on something entirely different, right? And you guys have created your own food, like in my opinion, your own category that if you've been paying attention to the last year, you're seeing a lot more people feeling more comfortable with their hyphen American background, right? And doing that food, even to a point where there's no more, like I don't see it. Before it used to be confusing. You're like, why are you doing this thing and this thing? Why is there Cheeto dust on everything? But when you give it a meaning, when you give a definition and do what you guys have done with the intentionality, you create something beautiful where you go in there with the right expectation, right? And yeah, you mentioned that your menu has changed very much from where you started to where you are. And I think that just comes with the time. It'll look very different next year. So for you personally, what was it that inspired that? What is it that drove you to say, okay, I'm going to do something that most people are either going to understand, or most people are going to be like, what the fuck is this? Right?
We were in Oaxaca on a trip before we opened. And it was right around the time where me and Jolyn we're trying to figure out if we were going to work together on this thing, this nebulous idea.
You had already moved here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were on vacation. We were invited to a trip. And it was the time where I was like telling her that I wanted to do something for myself. And she was sort of telling me like, I don't know, just making a decision whether you were going to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided that we were going to work together. And we had this conversation about what the name was going to be. Because we kept talking about like, okay, what is the concept, right? Like you say you're going to open a restaurant, people are going to ask you a few things. They're going to ask you what the food is. You got to figure that out. They're going to ask you, and then you're going to have to figure out what the name of the restaurant's going to be. Like those are the two sort of main things that sort of drive who you are, right? And, we got to this point where we were talking about this phrase, Xiao Ye, which in Mandarin means midnight snack. But it means a lot more than that. But it just like straight translation means midnight snack.
It's more like a meal period.
Yeah, it's
almost.
like a meal period. It's
like dinner, but
yeah, it's like saying
snack.
dinner.
Yeah.
It's not like it has to be at a certain time. It's really more of the idea behind it is that like it is this late night thing that sort of cures you, right? And so like you have a midnight snack after a night out drinking 2 a.m, right? You go somewhere, or you can have a midnight snack. Like I used to have when I would go back to Taiwan to visit my extended family, we'd always land there around 9 p.m. And right when you walk through the door, the first question that you get asked, right, is, are you hungry? Like, do you want Xiao Ye? And then you have your own story for why that's so powerful for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to tell it.
Please.
Yeah. Yeah. Back in the day when I was going to school at Cal Poly, so I was living at home with my parents, and my dad loved to eat, especially late night. And he's up late all the time. And so I used to be serving at Cheesecake Factory at Brea.
I know exactly.
You know exactly.
It's a busy cheesecake.
Yeah, it's a banging Cheesecake Factory. And I would come home late, and I always know he's up late. And so I always order something off the menu and a cheesecake, and I would bring it home. And so I bring it home, and then he knows, like it's always like a spaghetti thing or a chicken Madeira thing, and like a chocolate cake. And we would just like break everything open. It's like midnight because I get off late, right? And so that was like a moment for us to like really connect as like a daughter and her dad. And
you coming in at what time?
Like midnight. Yeah, like late night, like after shift, like after dinner shift, have all these snacks, and he's up and he's making his Folgers coffee, and we sit down and we just like chat about our day, or like just what's happening in life. And he'd always call that like Xiao Ye, like, oh, let's have some Xiao Ye. And then it was such a moment that, you were asking me at the time when we were concepting, like, what's your most like transcendent dining experience?
That's right.
And I was like trying to think back, like,
she doesn't remember food very well.
Don't say that.
Sorry. You don't remember restaurants that
I don't remember what I eat, but I know what it feels like to be in wherever I'm at, because I'm a more atmospheric person or environmental person than food. And where was I going with that? Anyways.
I asked you what your most transcendent.
And I was thinking like, okay, is it like our time at, single thread or French laundry, thinking about these like transcendent possible meals. And then I really thought about it, and I was like, oh, it's really these moments I had having Xiao Ye with my dad. And because I was like, those are the moments I'm like, I remember, they're so comforting, and you're so connected to whoever you're eating it with. And you generally don't care about what it is. And it's like something about also eating late night when the whole world is sleeping and it's just you two. It feels like, I always say it's like kids at a sleepover doing the wrong thing, rumbling through the kitchen, eating snacks that you're not supposed to be eating. And that kind of cheeky feeling is like what I equate to like my version of Xiao Ye, or like having Xiao Ye with someone.
And people, in our industry, when you get off of work and you go with coworkers to the bar and get a burger, right? Like that is also the same thing. And so, she mentioned that was her most transcendent
dining
experience, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, cool. Like, what can we take from that? Like, what are we gonna implement to our business from that? And so the name came out. We were like, okay,
Xiao Ye.
And I think you settle the conversation, because I think that's one of the things that people ask you the most, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you pronounce it?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Xiao Ye. And so we were talking about that, and we were like, man, you know what's scary is that we're going to name this restaurant that is, and the second part of that question that people always ask you is what kind of food you're going to do, right? And I was like, well, let me tell you, it's not going to be just Chinese food, right? Like, because I don't know how to really cook that. Like, I never cooked it professionally in my life.
Yeah, and you didn't grow up in Taiwan.
No, I didn't
Like
grow up
that's
in
the thing.
Taiwan.
People think like because we're Taiwanese, we know how to cook
everything,
every
my parents are
Taiwanese
really
dish ever,
good.
and we're
Yeah.
pros at it somehow.
Like I would never want to do that because like I know that I can't make it better than the stuff that you get on the street in Taiwan,
Right.
or the stuff that your grandma makes, right? Like
You're going to
it's
make
not-
it different.
I'm gonna make it different. And so you were like, okay, cool. Now we're gonna open this restaurant that has like a weird menu that's kind of all over the place, right? That's representative of us. Before we had a category to even fit that in. And then we're gonna call it this name that is like so obviously Chinese, like so obviously Chinese. It's so strange for people. And they're gonna ask you like, why? Right. And we just got to a point where we were like, we could change the name of the restaurant to something that's digestible, that's understandable. But what we're doing is we're doing a disservice to the story and the reason why we're doing it, right? Like we're doing it because we want, when you come in the door, to feel like to feel like how we feel when we have those kind of meals with your best friends or your closest coworkers or your family and all that stuff. That like connection and comfort and closeness that you have from having a midnight snack with somebody. We want you to feel that way when you come in. And so if we name it something else, then how are we ever going to like tell that story? And we would only be changing it because we're scared that people don't know how to pronounce it and won't understand why we call it that, why it's called that, even though it's not
A Chinese restaurant.
You left. You came to Portland for your dream job.
Yeah.
You mentioned that in the past. And he's proposing this crazy idea. What pushed that decision? What pushed you to say, okay, I'm going to leave my dream job to go and do this? And by the way, can you tell us about the dream job?
Yeah, so I have been, as an interior designer, there are certain firms that are like your dream firms. And Jessica Helgerson interior design was like my dream job. If you've ever looked at their projects and stuff like that, they're just incredible. And they're like, I would say like the best in the country. And they're just incredible. And I think I've applied twice. I've applied once early on when we were in LA, didn't get it. And then during the pandemic, I applied again and then I got it. And I was like,
you were coming from hospitality.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, at that point I was in LA and I had gone back to school for interior design.
Yeah.
So I was like still working in restaurants just to pay the bills and then also working in interior design firms so I could get the experience in LA. So I was doing a little bit of both while you were still in restaurants full time.
We sort of skipped through that part, but
Yeah.
we were in DC. We started dating in DC, working together, dating, and then working around together, with each other.
I feel like we're gonna have to link back to the New York Times story. But
Yeah. And then we moved to LA so that she could go to school. So she wanted to pivot away from hospitality, or at least like sideways. And then you wanted to do something art related, which you've kind of always wanted to do.
Yeah, creative, something. Because my sister was very creative and ended up going to New York and doing the real art school thing. And my mom was an artist as well. And so it was something, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to do the same thing, but I just didn't have the technical skills for it. And so going back to school was the thing for me.
And so we moved back to LA and she went to school. And during that, she was working in hospitality, but then also like kind of slowly taking one foot out of it and then another foot out and then diving all the way in. And then, so yeah, during the pandemic, you applied.
Yeah.
What were you doing this whole time?
I was working in a restaurant.
Which one?
Felix. Okay. Felix Trattoria in Venice. I approached that job just like I do with every job change. Is basically we ended up eating there and it was great. And they had just been open like a few months. And I was like looking around restaurants in LA and trying to figure out where I would work after being destroyed and burnt out in DC and taking a break for a little bit. And that ended up being really the only place that I wanted to work. And so I just got a stage, and I, did what I could, and graciously enough, I was hired, and worked there the whole time we were in LA, basically.
So going back to what pushed you to say, I'm gonna do this?
I think I was like a year into my job, and you were kind of talking about it a lot. And originally I wasn't going to work in the restaurant. I was just going to be like, I'll help you design it and I'll help you concept, all the creative stuff.
Let me just say, it's one of my favorite spaces.
Yeah. Moments in the process, you mean?
No.
In the restaurant.
Yeah. No. The process, I stay, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
Until you realize how much it's going to cost. You're like, oh, fuck.
Oh, yeah. That part breaks my heart.
Right.
I'm always like, so how much do I have for my budget?
Yeah. No, I watched my partner, Olivia, who is really the person who runs all of our restaurants, doing things like plumbing the bar, because it's just like, well, if we plumb the bar, I could buy these chairs, that kind of thing, right? So, but for you created such a beautiful space. Like I said, it's one of my favorite spaces in Portland. I think I told you that the first time I was there. I'm like, I'm just going to hang out here outside of the bathroom and be weird, because it's just such a nice setup. But you have this background and you have this decision to make, and you're not really sure, right?
Yeah, and the whole time, even during like the build out, the whole point, or the whole, like, I don't know, like the whole idea was that I was just going to design it, help you get to opening, and then you're going to hire your front of house team, and they're just going to take it away with you. And I think at some point, we were having a hard time finding a GM.
Yeah.
And so
she was doing good in her design work. I think part of it, like 9-to-5 stuff, wasn't super.
Yeah, 9-to-5 is really hard to do after you've done restaurant work. Mm-hmm. It's like going from a environment where you're constantly around people, you're talking, you're really like using your extrovertedness, and you're moving your body a lot, from that to like sitting at home 9-to-5 in front of a computer, getting arthritis on my wrists from all the mouse work, and then only having Zoom meetings. Like, it's so sad.
Especially if the person you love is like waking up at 11 o'clock and
just moseying about, having coffee whenever he wants.
I'm gonna go have coffee. I'm gonna go.
Yeah. I was just like, dang, the energy is so different. And like, I love the work of design. It's just like, I wish I had the energy of a restaurant, because it's addictive. That's why we're all in it, right?
So she was originally just going to be sort of an owner and whatever, and like help me get their concept, like it was, bouncing ideas off each other like partners. And then it got to the point where we were like, well, she sort of was like, no one's going to care about it more than me. And I was like, you have the ability to, right? But like, I also didn't want her to necessarily have to do that, right? Like, it was never a goal of mine to have her work in the restaurant every day and do operations, right? Like, because it's a grind and you have to fully buy in. And I was like, you should be designing. Like, you're so great at that too. And the earning potential is really high. And I'm like, you should do that because you like it. But also, like, I understand that you also don't really love that life either, right? You're craving something, you're missing something. So you're like, you can be like, how about you just like run food a couple days a week?
Yeah, that was
we'll hire
plan.
a GM, whatever. We got through this process. We started talking to a bunch of people in the city. Not that they weren't qualified, right? But like, also no one knew who we were. So it wasn't like we were getting a million resumes.
Mm-hmm.
And it just got to a point where we were like, okay, well, number one, is anybody going to care more than her, right? That she was asking herself that. And then the other thing was like, she was like, I got this thing to life, right? Like, we carried this baby through its term and now it's about to be born. And you're like, Jolyn was like, I'm just going to walk away. Like, that seems crazy.
Like, I'm just going to give it up for adoption.
Surrogate GM and
that's
great. Like, just give it to somebody else. Like, that's great. It's our first one, right? Like, she's like, that was crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't feel like the timing worked out where we were just like, well, I guess you're going to be our GM. And it's funny because
it was like 2 weeks before opening, we decided that.
Yeah. And a friend was like months before. she was like, you're just going to be the GM, right? And Jolyn was like, no.
Yeah.
I have a good job.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to pay the bills.
Sure,
She's like, you're going to be the GM. And I was like, no, I'm not.
What made you guys settle for the neighborhood? Because you are in an island in many ways.
Great question. Well, we didn't pick the neighborhood. The space was what we picked.
Yeah, right.
And the space is like, you've seen it. It's just this. We worked with a broker. Who's amazing. And he's sent us like, just all the listings, and we were looking at it. We saw 2 other places like down in Division that were like, very like
we had a
sterile.
We had a list of things that we didn't want. Right? We were like, these are the things that we would hope to have 15 items on, right? Because you're just like, this is the ideal situation is this.
Yeah.
But then we capped ourselves at 2,500 square feet, which I think also like really significantly shortens the supply of the kind of space that we want. Because 2,500 square feet is really like the bottom level of an apartment building, right? That's like really what you're going to get. You can get bigger spaces that are more beautiful, but like we were scared to do that. And so he sent us a bunch of places. We went to go see those
2 in Division. And then he sent us the space that Xiao Ye is currently in. And I was looking at it and I was like, oh, it's so interesting the way it looks. It's like, it's 3,000. So it's out of our range,
right?
3,000 square feet.
So it wasn't a consideration
until
we looked at the other places.
And then,
we're like, don't work.
I think I like looked on Google Maps just to see what the exterior, everything looked like. I was like, oh shoot, it's a brick building. It's standalone. It's in a corner. And I was like, well, where's Hollywood?
we just been here for like 6 months.
Yeah, I was like, where is this place? And at the time, we didn't even have a car, so we like took the bus up on Sandy, and then we got off, and then we're like walking over. I was like, oh, this is so cute. And we're trying. There's like paper all on the window, so we're just like trying to like
so much graffiti everywhere.
Yeah, everything around it for lease. Everything around it graffiti,
and
we're like,
space that was open still. There's that right across the street. There's a center, like a little
island
thing. And then on the corner, which is now gone, but it was a Starbucks. That was it.
Yeah. And I was like, dang, this place is, because I was looking for some place that would feel homey. That's like, I already knew that's what the interior is going to feel like. And so the concrete boxes were really hard for me to really justify. And I was like, I had to do so much for it to like make it feel cozy. And so I looked at the space and I was like, dang, I need to go inside.
You need to see it.
Yeah.
Because from the outside, you're like, okay, this is now checking a lot of boxes.
Yeah.
Warm, brick outside. I mean, that's a dream, right? To have a brick building.
And you could see like there's wood inside, beams and stuff like that.
We were like looking in, trying to figure out.
Yeah, parts of the paper that were torn, we're like trying to.
Yeah.
Went in, and I was like, we walked in and we looked at each other like, this is it.
Have you tortured yourself since and thought maybe if we would have gone to this part of town or downtown?
No.
Good.
It felt right. Like it's like one of those like when you know feelings, and like that was one of them. I was like, this is it.
Yeah, and logically, you're like, okay, well, it's more expensive than we thought because it's
bigger,
20% bigger than we want, 15% bigger, and it's in a part of town that we have been told is having a trouble. But we didn't care, right? Because like, I mean, coming from LA, but also like we didn't have that experience, right? We didn't see that corner during the pandemic, like during the actual, like the really tough times. And yeah, you notice a bunch of like for lease signs around, but like we're like, okay, number one, we're sandwiched in between some really great neighborhoods. And everything we know about that part of town is everyone is they like really want a restaurant. Everybody in that neighborhood wants more places to go eat.
They want to walk to places.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is tough, right? Like north of us, south of us, North Tabor, all that stuff. Like there are very few restaurants because it's very neighborhood centric,
and there's a freeway that cuts right into it. So there's like hard to, do you know what I mean? It's not the cutest walk.
Right.
But you're like, that's why people avoid it, right? They're avoiding it because of all of these factors that are telling you like, it's hard to park, it's hard to whatever. But you look at that space and you're like, there's no way that's not going to work. There's no way it's not going to work. Like where we are located, even if people aren't even if there aren't other businesses propping you up, if you do a good job, if we do what we want to do, then we can have that special place that transports you when you walk in the door. You walk in the door and it's raining and you have freeway sound right next to you. And as soon as you open the door and you hear a busy restaurant and the warmth that we can create and all that stuff that like we were thinking that we wanted out of this place before we were even designing it, you're like, you can just imagine, you can just feel that it's possible there. And rather than going with a safer option in a busier neighborhood that maybe has a little bit less soul, right? Concrete box, stuff like that, like shared bathroom, all this stuff, nothing wrong with that. But like, if you do that, you're safer, but it doesn't give you that feeling that we're hoping to have, that transportive, that immersive thing that when you come and have dinner with us, that we try to give everybody. So yeah, no regrets at all.
You mentioned the food, right? Like when your background and the expectations, right? You have two kids with Taiwanese descent, so therefore people are going to be expecting ducks hanging from the window, and there isn't, right? You took on something that I guess most people would have just kind of gone with the classics and added a few things, but you've done completely the opposite and created your own thing. How much more confident do you feel a year later, knowing that you didn't have to at any point? Well, for one, you didn't have to do any switches like that. But the other is that, I will tell you firsthand, when we opened our space, Republica, I remember 2 days before we opened, my partner at the time um, saying, look, man, I got to be honest with you. Like, I'm kind of scared. Like, we're both very Mexican and we grew up on this food, but we never grew up making it. And you could see some of that. Like, we could see some of him hiding those insecurities in many ways, right? And we were fortunate enough that we had enough Mexicans around us to help us say, you do it this way, this is how you get that, or you call your mother. But for you, how much of that happened when you were trying to create? And how much more confident do you feel a year later?
I do feel a lot more confident, but I don't think it's because of that necessarily. I feel confident because, well, okay, so I think we opened the restaurant on a dream and a lot of sort of ideals. And we've been really lucky to be able to sort of stick to those. And one of the ideals was like, I don't want people to help to define what I'm doing for me, right? I want to be able to figure out a way to tell people succinctly in my own words, in my own way, what my food is. And so the scary part in the opening was that I had never done that before, right? It wasn't like, I think I didn't have the pressure necessarily that you guys might have had to like represent Mexican food in that way, in a way that you felt really good about, but also was true to the culture and the history of the food in Mexico, which we all know is like
Layers.
so layered, right? So is Taiwanese food. So it's like everybody's like that. So I didn't want to put that pressure on myself. Number one, like I can't tell the story of Taiwanese food in the way that a lot of other people can. I can't tell a story about Italian food. I can't tell a story about French food. The way a lot of people can. But what I can do is explore who I am as someone who wants to create food, as a creative person. And do that. And that's scary because if you've never done it before, then you're sort of exploring who you are on an open stage for the first time. First time you get to like put something together that's actually true to you and like really, really representative of who you are as a creative person is like in front of however many people a night, right? So that's really, really scary that you're wondering, are people going to connect with this? And so now a year later, you have dishes that are really, really great. You have dishes that are okay, but everyone is telling you like, hey, like keep doing what you're doing. Like it's awesome. When you walk in the door and you get it, like you really get it. And that makes me feel really good. It's like, okay, cool. Like take these risks, put together a menu that does not make sense on paper, only in practice, like really, really hits home if you get it. And it's happened, and people get it, and even the people who don't get it are like, I kind of like don't understand, but it's like cool, right?
They're like, it's good.
It's good. Like I'm confused. Like I don't know what to think, but it's cool. And that makes me feel great. It's like, okay, cool. Like I can do anything, right? Like I can tell chapters of my story and who I am as a person with every new dish that we put on. Just like, this is chapter 12. This is my time in LA eating Indian takeout. This is my time in DC working with these chefs that like would go crazy over tomatoes in the summer and Wonder Bread and Duke's Mayo. And this is my time in this. And we give that opportunity to our chef de cuisine, Sam, and our sous chef, Tori, and all of our cooks as well. Like, you have a story and a chapter that you want to tell. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it, and that makes me feel really, really, really good about what we're doing. The nervousness about putting a dish on the menu never goes away. Never. Like the nervousness about like the anxiousness of putting your story out there, regardless of whether it has any real meaning to you, right? Like it's just like you're just putting yourself out there.
I worry more about people that
Yeah.
confidently without feedback are just like have it. And
Yeah.
you're like, hold on a second.
Yeah. It's really, really nerve-wracking.
Right.
It is.
As it should be.
Mm.
What is next? I mean, and YouTube will probably give me a different answer, but for you personally, what does the next phase look like?
What is the next phase in the restaurants?
I mean, the next phase is the next phase. Could be the restaurant, could be restaurants, could be.
I would love a second concept.
Same concept, different thing.
No, I would love a second,
Just
like a full second concept that's just less heady, more fun, like a second child is.
I love that.
We're both.
Yeah, that's how I know.
Yeah, I see. I knew it was good. I'm assuming you feel different.
But I also want more rest. So how do I do that? I don't know.
There's a point. One, you never get the full rest. You're going to get to a point where everybody's fully staffed and everybody's good. You're like, wow, I'm going to take a day off. And the day you plan to take the day off, somebody calls in sick and you move it. That never changes.
Oh, I know.
Scatter days.
Yikes.
Yes, I would love to have another concept and multiple concepts and all that stuff. But you're asking next step. Next step to me is I've sort of shifted my focus this year. I don't know, like it's how can I figure out a way to make this restaurant successful, continue to do what it's going to do, and just succeed as a business. Sort of doing that work as an operator and learning those things. And I really, really want this restaurant in the next year to grow, to be a sustainable thing so that we can focus on what our actual next step is. Like I can't even think about the actual next step, like the physical next concept and all that stuff, as much as I want to, as much as I'm like, I have ambitions to do that until baby number one is
safe and sound.
Potty trained.
Potty trained. Yeah. I think we were talking a lot about like systems the second year. The first year you don't have data. So you have no idea what your marks are. Now we have data. So now we can try to hit the marks, make educated guesses or more educated guesses, and putting systems in place that can make us more efficient. I think because the first year you're really winging it. Like, for instance, like my front of house, I didn't really have to start hiring for more until recently. And I was like, oh, I need a new training packet because I don't have anything in place.
You look back at it.
Well,
you're like, this is not what we do anymore from opening till now. And it's interesting because you're like, okay, now I have to like create all these things that's going to make it like run itself.
Yeah. And for me, in tandem with that is like, the goal this year is to be very, very vocal and open and honest about our concept and tell the story through our words and be direct with those things. And so, talking about first generation American food more, talking about what it means to us, talking about what it should mean to other people, talking about what we want to do at the restaurant, talking about our successes and our failures, and just being very open in that way. and just trying some more stuff. And so that is like a super big focus. Is like, let's nail down the stuff at the restaurant, and then hopefully things figure themselves out and they're really great, and then we can confidently be like, hey, like let's tackle that.
Right now, where is that? What is, how much of the concept would you would say represents your culture, your upbringing, the lessons from your family, and some of those, some of the struggles, if there were struggles? How much of that is represented, or in the concept, I should say?
I mean,
isn't that the whole thing?
that's all of it, right?
Yeah, because it's our lived experiences as like first generation Taiwanese Americans. Like that includes our upbringing and like the places we've been and traveled to and worked and how we were raised.
Yeah, it's a way for us to tell our full story about our lives.
Do you think the public sees it though enough?
No.
I don't think we talk about it.
Yeah. I think what happens is like you think if you post one time about one thing, that's enough. It's not enough.
We kind of, at times you can kind of like shy away from that. I don't want to talk about myself too much, right? Like, how annoying are we going to be, if we keep talking about this stuff? But at the same time, like, yeah, it's hard for people to understand the reasons why these things make such an impact on us as people who grew up in this country, who were born and grew up in this country, but have such strong ties to their heritage through their family. And yet, like, my Chinese is at a preschool level, like I am so Taiwanese. And yet, if you talk to me about my family's history, I'm also like very like Northern Chinese. And then if you talk to me about like really the stuff that I like feel like are me, it's all from growing up here and moving around the country and eating and seeing things and traveling and all that stuff. And you probably feel the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's everything. It's every time we do something like put chicken livers on a menu, just fried, or chicken hearts, or, this thing where you tell you that you have to eat the head of the shrimp, right? Like, those things are very straightforward to us. That's our culture. That's our life, right? The reason why we leave bones in a fish is so that you can
take it
apart,
yeah.
Right? The reason why we want to leave a head on the fish is for the same reason, because that's the part that my mom ate. That's the part that our family ate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we didn't necessarily eat them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We ate them sometimes, but they wanted that and we wanted the meat. And that's our lives. And like, it's so nuanced and there's so many little things that like people don't understand that we do have to do a better job of like talking about it all the time. It doesn't mean we have to be preachy. It doesn't mean we have to like, not everything has to have a story and not everyone has to understand it. But that's the beauty of it, is that you can hear it and listen to it and not necessarily like resonate with it, but understand it. Right. And it allows you to understand that like, hey, I don't know anything about your story, but I'm here to listen to you in however you want to tell it. And then on the flip side, it's like, there are things that you, as like, if we reverse it, that I don't know anything about you either, right? So you can tell me stuff about your childhood and your life and the things that have influenced you. And I can't assume any of that because I wouldn't want anyone to assume anything about us. And so we're telling the story about all these things that we're doing, and it allows us to listen to the next person who has a story, who has a connection to a dish that we make or something that feels nostalgic and something from their childhood in a different way than ours. And we can listen to that story and the reason why it hits home for them. And for us, hopefully it opens that discussion to lowering the expectations of what you think someone is going to be like, or what you hope someone's going to be like, what you expect someone to be like. And just like, don't expect anything. Just listen to how they want to tell it. That's a little bit of what we're trying to do.
Amazing. One last thing before, because I know you guys got stuff to do. Actually, you're close today.
Yeah, we're good.
We're fine. All right. Well, one last thing, because I think one of my favorite things, and I mentioned this before we came on, but that I ran into is opening up my New York Times app in the morning and seeing the story of your story, your personal story, away from the restaurant and how you two met. And for anybody that gets a chance to jump on and just Google it, it'll come right up. But if I may ask, if you two do not meet, if you don't have the background that connects you back to Southern California, and you just happen to meet at the restaurant where you both were working at the time, do you think the same outcome, happened? The same, you two. I don't even know how to describe it because people need to read the whole thing to understand how goofy that whole thing was on your end, but in a good way. Like where you just ambushed.
I don't think so.
So you're saying we're not meant to be?
No. We're both really stubborn people.
Okay.
And if you were going to be like, the reason why we fought it for so long is because people kept saying, like, we should be together, right? Like, you guys are such good
why are you
friends.
guys not dating?
How long were you guys friends in DC before?
We're roommates. So he moved and he became a roommate instantly. And it was like 2.5 years of living together.
Oh, just roommates.
Being
Just
best
roommates.
friends.
Yeah.
Just being best friends.
That's so pure.
True best friends.
Yeah.
Like I was dating and I was telling you about him.
You had to hear that shit?
Yeah.
He
didn't care.
I didn't care.
He wasn't into that. Like he wasn't
I love it.
Here, this is the thing. And the reason why I say that it wouldn't have worked if we just met one day in a restaurant and didn't know each other is we've been talking about these things since we were in high school. We've been talking about relationships and hanging out with each other and hanging out with friends together. Career and life and what you want to do, what your dreams are and all that stuff for years, since basically you were a freshman in high school and I was a sophomore in high school. And that just kept growing really organically, right? We became a group with two other of our friends and we hung out all the time. She would come to Santa Barbara and party with us, party with me, us four, once a year, twice a year, something like that. And we wouldn't keep up with each other. We're not like, hey, how are things going? But we would always find a way to hang out a couple times a year and just got closer and closer. And they were always really honest conversations. And you get to a point in your friendship where you're like, I, who have never fully given myself to any single other human being beside myself, realize how much I care about this person as a friend, as a person. Why the fuck aren't we dating? Right? I care about you, and all of a sudden you something switches and you're like, whoa, that's actually a different relationship that I've ever had in my life.
But that came to you first before it came.
Yeah, it happened because we were at the point in our careers in DC or time in DC where I was like, I want to go to art school. I want to move to New York. I want to move to LA and then just move away. And then he's like, so we're not going to be roommates? Like, what do you mean?
You're just going to leave.
You're just going to leave?
You're my best friend. You're just going to go.
Yeah.
Without even.
And I think that was a thing. You're like, oh, what is life going to be like when we're not roommates or best friends in the same city? Like, how is that going to alter our life at that point? And so I think that is the catalyst in your brain. Meanwhile, I was just like, I want to go to art school.
And we were both in our mid-20s, right? Young.
Just having a good time.
Working a lot.
So I don't know. And then I think it was you were just kept saying, but what if it works out? And I kept saying, well, you're my roommate. We work together. You're my best friend. What if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
My life would be ruined. I would lose so much.
And there was never a period in between where if this was a cheesy rom-com, I feel like there would be something in the middle.
There was a breakup in between.
It falls apart and then, wow.
The first month of her mostly, but us reckoning with the kiss on the street and all that stuff was a lot of discussions about what it meant, what it was going to mean, how we were going to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next 6 months was a lot of me working through now how to give myself to somebody fully without being a dummy and learning how to do that. And then from then on, it was like, oh, we get it. Like it's good.
Yeah.
Because we're best friends first, right? Ultimately, we're always going to be best friends first.
Yeah. Very natural, I think, the transition after we mentally decided, after we got over our stubbornness.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for moving to Portland. Thank you for finding each other. Thank you for opening this incredible restaurant. And really, for me personally, thank you for keeping the level of intentionality that you have kept to make this thing as you imagined it and not as how other people would have wanted it, which is the most important part. I look forward to you guys just going out there and just telling more of that story, because I feel it's so important to, not just to the community for people to understand it, but rather for a lot of people that through what you've done so far. And I mean this because I just had this conversation with one of my young employees. They're like, I want to do something like this. It wasn't a description of like, I want to do something that's Mexican American of my upbringing. They mentioned this like this, right? Like what you guys are doing. And I feel like that's when you reach a critical point, right? Where when you have that influence of people that is giving them the comfort to talk about their upbringing and doing the things that make absolutely no sense. Like, spaghetti verde, which is something I grew up on. It's like this cream cheese thing with spaghetti, right? There's so much of that. So, and on behalf of all of Portland and everybody that watches this stuff, thank you guys for